and welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz, and today is True Crime Tuesday. So we are on our last episode in our Sinful summer series. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed trying to pick an extreme example of a crime that fits for each sin. Well, today is lust, and this one holds a special place in my heart. But before we do that, let's pause for a quick promotion. Nothing like getting the lust going then with a smile, so let's talk about getting a brighter one. I don't know about you, but for the longest time, I used to be extremely self-conscious about the color of my teeth. I used to have some stains that weren't the worst, but weren't making me feel my best either. Finally, about 2 years or so, I gave in and decided to try snow, and I am so glad I did. My teeth are so much brighter, which has given me the confidence to smile as wide as I want whenever I want. They're still so much brighter after the initial treatment, even 2 years later. And I just do touch-ups from literally the same starter kit every so often. And today I've got a deal for you. If you want to give them a try, go ahead and click the link in my description. They'll give you 25% off your first order. So if you're thinking about trying an affordable teeth whitening option that actually works, I strongly recommend Snow. I don't know if I can quite go as far to say they've changed my life, but I am smiling wider and brighter, and you can be too. Anyhow, let's get back to today's story. So we'll start with a question. How many of you have been burned by lust? How many of you have been hurt? This was hard for me, so I tried to pick a case that almost poked fun of it, but little did I know. Again, there was a lot beneath the surface with this one, similar to our Menendez brothers who took our greed slot. It was really cut and dry in my head until I took a real dive in. Anyways, that scene in 7 is just beyond disturbing.
He made me do it. He put that thing on me. And he made me wear it. Then he told me to fuck her. And I did. I fucked her. Oh God, he had a gun in my mouth. The fucking gun was in my throat. Fuck!
And the thought of sex as a weapon is something that I don't think many of us want to think about, let alone experience. But it happens, and today that's what we're going to talk about. Let's start today's story by meeting Lorena. Lorena was born in Ecuador in 1969, but would grow up in Caracas, Venezuela with her 2 younger siblings. When she turned 15, she was gifted a trip to the United States for her quinceañera, which is a thing they do for Latinas for their 15th birthday, kind of like how we used to do sweet 16s over here. Do we still do those? Anyhow, after she took her trip to the US, she decided that she wanted to move there. Her father was working as a dental technician, and the family was doing okay for themselves, but they were unable to emigrate together to the United States. So in 1987, Lorena would emigrate herself with a student visa, and she would work odd jobs to try to get on her feet. She was a nanny at one point and then worked in a nail salon. Lorena was taking classes at a community college in Virginia when she met a man named John. John was a young Marine from Niagara Falls, New York, who was raised by his aunt and uncle. He would end up being Lorena's first real boyfriend, and less than a year after that, the couple would decide to get married on June 18th of 1989. John would later state that he felt kind of pressured to marry her to keep their relationship going as her visa was going to expire. She kind of denies that. And apparently John wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed being questioned, which is all fine and good as long as you don't go around assaulting the people who question you. Just a couple weeks into their marriage, John decides to pound down a few too many and drive himself and Lorena home. And when she voiced her concern, he quickly silenced her with his fist. And according to Lorena, he would only escalate from there and would beat and then even go on to rape her when she would question him about anything from his spending habits to just having house guests over with no advance notice and just expecting her to be okay with it. The relationship didn't slow down either, so the couple would wed in 1989, then buy a house together in 1990. Then in 1991, John would leave the Marines and Lorena's nail tech job became their sole source of income. It got to the point with their finances where she got caught stealing money from her employer and was stealing clothes to keep up with the pressure of John's wandering eyes. Her employer would make her pay back the money, which was a little over $7,000 with interest, and they would kind of just settle that outside of court. And the abuse wasn't stopping either. As many of you know, things like that don't stop. They just escalate. Things got so bad that the police would respond to calls multiple times, and then finally in February of 1991, John would be charged with assault and battery, and he would plead guilty to these charges, but the charges would be dropped and he would attend some sort of counseling courses for the issue. Obviously, John was able to give his side of the story, and of course, in many of these cases, there are two very different sides to every story, and the truth is often found somewhere in the middle or somewhere leaning towards one more side, but somewhere in there. And his side was that Lorena was extremely jealous and would go off and start hitting him, and he would end up having to strike back to protect himself. I mean, he was only 160 pounds, but she was only 95 pounds. I don't know. Things are crazy. But in October of 1991, the pair would separate, but then they would reunite again about a year later. At some point during this time, Lorena would become pregnant, and John would force her to end the pregnancy. And apparently he even taunted her and told her she might die right before the procedure. In April of 1993, the pair would move to a new place in Manassas, Virginia. Then on June 21st, Lorena would start attempting to get a protective order against her husband. She was either unable or didn't want to wait around for the 3 hours for the paperwork and ended up leaving without it, which didn't end up playing out well because just 2 days later, John would brutally attack Lorena yet again, and the aftermath would end up making national headlines. Just 2 days later, on June 23rd of 1993, John would come home in another drunken stupor. He would proceed to beat and rape Lorena, and something inside of her at that point just snapped. In her own words,
I don't know how to describe things like from the very first day he hit me, things about the abortion, you know, so many things, when he was torturing me, when he was beating me up, when he has forced sex with me, everything, it just came so fast.
She would proceed to grab a knife from the kitchen, and while he lay in bed passed out drunk, she lifted his penis up and sliced it clean off with the knife. Then she ran out of the house with it. She started driving, penis still in one hand, until she reached a stop sign, realized she had a severed penis in her hand, and chucked it out the window. She would then drive to her friend's house, and when she told her friend what she did, they basically implored her to call the police, which she did end up doing. John apparently didn't even scream. He just kind of went into survival mode and started to put pressure on his wounds. In his words,
Sprung up and I was bleeding, I was applying pressure. Then immediately I thought it was something out of a horror movie.
It was a nightmare, but it was real.
It turned into reality. Horrified, terrified. I was gonna die. That was it. I'm gonna die.
so they would actually go out and find the severed penis, and they would be able to reattach it as well. So John was pretty fortunate there. There was also a very unusual comment that Lorena made when the officers were interviewing her. She stated that he would always orgasm and never wait for her to, and that was what she said when they asked why she dismembered him. She would then go on to say that she stated things wrong because she didn't have access to a translator. So that does kind of make a little shade and doubt in the situation, but if she didn't quite know how to articulate herself, I mean, that kind of makes sense too. I don't know. Then both parties would be tried for their part in the incident. On November of 1993, John was charged with marital sexual assault. He ended up being found not guilty because at that time, Virginia law required couples to be living separately or for serious injuries to occur for a person to be charged with marital rape. Because that makes sense. Then in January of 1994, Lorena would start her trial for malicious wounding. If you remember, the media had a field day with this one. They had a radio station serving hot dogs and Slice soda. Then they had people outside peddling chocolate penises and t-shirts as well. Then on January 21st of 1994, Lorena would be found not guilty due to temporary insanity. She would be sent to a hospital for 45 days of evaluation and then be released. I don't know, diving into this one was hard. I mean, if you've ever experienced this type of thing, I don't know, asking someone to stop raping you is a whole nother level, and that's all. I guess if you have, there's a small part of you, I don't know how to word this properly, but understands Lorena's actions on a level. To be clear, I'm not condoning what she did. She should not have done that, but I get it. Anyways, the pair would finalize their divorce in 1995, and when all was said and done, the two took very different paths in life, and I think that's quite telling. So let's start with John. First, John tried to capitalize on his notoriety by forming a band called the Severed Parts. He didn't have a whole lot of luck there, so he went on to try and star in adult films. Excuse me. He would then go on to get engaged to an exotic dancer, but she would break off the engagement, and in August of 1994, he would be convicted of battery against her and receive 15 days in jail. The Justice of the Peace would state that he firmly believed that he had an attitude problem that was caused by his drinking. Sounds about right. He would move on to Vegas and do odd jobs as a bartender, mower, delivery driver, and even a minister. Then just this year, apparently he had to have his toes amputated, which left him unable to work. Apparently it was some sort of toxic disease that he thought was caused by toxins in the water that he swam in as a kid in the 80s, which is pretty random, but... And Lorena's decisions, after all was said and done, are actually going to be today's positive highlight. She would end up becoming a U.S. citizen in 1994. Unlike John, she didn't choose to capitalize on the lust factors of today's case, and she actually turned out $1 million offer to pose for Playboy. She would instead take work as a cosmetologist, a real estate agent, and an assistant. Then in 2007, she would start the Lorena Gallo Foundation. This foundation helps victims of domestic violence sort of like provide the help to women that she wishes that she had when she was married to John. So I have to say, bravo to Lorena. I just kind of feel like their choices after the incident could shed light to each of their characters and perhaps even shed a tiny bit more light onto what actually happened. Well, this was our last episode in our Sinful Summer series, and I had a lot of fun with it. I may do it again next summer. We'll see. Next week, we'll be back to a big name from the town that I'm currently living in, which his life was cut short by greed and severe lack of compassion. Anyhow, stay safe out there, guys. I feel compelled to say, if you're in this type of situation and you need help, please reach out. Either way, get help. Whether you're an abusive sociopath like Johnny Boy here or his victim like Lorena, get the help you need. See you next week.